Welcome to the Tackling Tech podcast, powered by Dyknow. Join us as we tackle all things ed tech with insightful interviews, actionable tips, and strategies that you can implement in your school or district to make technology integration more effective. Whether you're a teacher, a tech coach, or a technology administrator, we're giving you an advantage in your role by sharing stories from people who are passionate about working with their peers and enhancing the learning experience with technology. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now let's tackle some tech.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Tackling Tech. If you like what you've heard so far, give us that 5 stars, hit subscribe, write a review. Those are all very, very helpful as we're trying to build awareness for this podcast. I wanted to take some time before you all listen to the conversation I had with Elizabeth Walhof, who's the assistant principal at the Air Academy High School in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to just give you all some context on what was happening around us as we launched this episode. This was a couple days after all of the news on COVID-19 started to hit, and in schools and districts were sent home, and everyone was trying to figure out how to operate in a remote learning environment. So the episode specifically is about Elizabeth's transition from the district to the school level, but as you listen to the episode, you'll quickly hear that it becomes more of a conversation about operating from a remote learning perspective, how to communicate and collaborate with her counterparts, real life situations that were currently happening. You'll hear things in the background. Elizabeth has children, and she's trying to do her job while working around her children, which is something that I'm sure a lot of listeners of Tackling Tech can relate to. So as we continue to record some of these episodes in real time, we'll find opportunities to bring topics to the table that are relevant and really matter. And e-learning, I know, is a big one, and I know there's so much to talk about. So keep tuning in. Make sure you hit subscribe, and I promise you we'll bring you those topics straight from industry leaders that are in the trenches and dealing with them today. Thanks so much for listening. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Tackling Tech, a podcast that shares stories about how you can build better collaboration in K-12 schools. I'm your host, Brett McGrath, Vice President of Marketing at Dyknow, and I'm excited to be joined today by Elizabeth Walhof. Elizabeth is currently the Assistant Principal at Air Academy High School in Colorado Springs, and before that, she was working in 4 different roles at 2 different districts, and that's something that we're going to unpack today. This is the first episode of Tackling Tech that I've recorded since all the changes happened in the current landscape in the world today, and I know these are uncertain times for everyone, and everyone's out there is trying to adapt to all the changes, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but I did want to address it, and I'm hoping for educators out there that Tackling Tech can serve as a 20 to 30 minute escape on a weekly basis doing this. We'll be focusing on topics moving forward, such as e-learning, and want to provide a platform for educators to share tactics that they're leveraging to best maximize learning in their district. But without further ado, welcome, Liz. How are you, and how is your school and district doing?
Good morning, Brett. I'm doing well. I think, like many people, I'm adjusting to the change. I'm finding that e-learning involves kind of long hours and a different workload than before, a different set of responsibilities than before, but it's good. I think in the long run, we're going to end up having learned a lot more about different ways to learn. And so some of the changes for our district, I'm in a relatively small district right now. We have about 29,000 kids. And so we are, each of our schools, we're a site-based district, so each of our schools is tackling this a little bit differently. At the high school where I work, we put out a pretty simple list for educators on what their responsibilities are. We do share a common LMS, so everybody's in the same place for their digital work, which is super helpful. And we've asked that teachers post one assignment every day, hold an hour of office hours every day, and that they stay on top of their grading and responding back. So that part I think is going pretty well. We're checking in with kids each day. I run the school's Instagram account, the main Instagram account that we have. And so I'm on with students every day, back and forth on, how did it go today? What do we need to know? How's it looking from your end? And then we likewise have a discussion board within our LMS for staff on what are celebrations and discoveries that you've had. So right now, I think the biggest thing that's helping our school get through is that we are in a constant process of discovery and learning about how is this shift working? What is the latest and greatest? Where do we need to make adjustments?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that background and description. I think just from my perspective and talking with different educators, it's really trying to, figure out how do we become more adaptable, and how do we learn on the fly, and how do we continue to do what we're doing to educate our students and align in the different functions internally to make that happen. And I know it's all fresh and new, but my hope is that, Liz, we have educators on like yourself, and people can begin to share those stories in real time, because I don't think there's a clear cut playbook on what works best. But hopefully, just as we talk about different initiatives that are in the market, people can begin to learn a little bit from experiences that we're all going through. But just today, we're not here, even though it's the time to talk about e-learning. I want to talk a little bit about something that just in my conversations with Liz, I thought was super interesting. We originally met via some email exchanges for a conference, technology coaching conference that we're hosting last Friday, probably. If you're listening to this now, it's already been hosted, which is always the weird thing about having a podcast and talking about things that have already happened. But that's neither here nor there. But in talking with Liz and looking at Liz's background, I thought it was super unique from the perspective of spending time at the district level, most specifically in the superintendent's cabinet, working on things like professional development and instruction. Those are topics we talk about a lot. And now you have moved into the school level as an administrator. So I thought in us talking before the call, you said, there are certainly things that I wish when I was at the district level would have known then that I know now working at the school level. So I think just that topic just in and of itself is going to be super interesting for us to dive into today. And I think our audience will see a lot of benefit from it. So to kick it off, can you talk a little bit about the roles you had at the district level and go into some detail on those?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is that I was a high school Spanish teacher first, and then was recruited out of that position to work at the district level as an ed tech coach for teachers. From there on, I progressed to working in professional development, became a director of ed innovation and professional learning, and eventually became both a director, worked at the cabinet level as a director of technology and a director of professional development for a very small district. I think most people who end up at the director level have gone through a slightly more traditional path. They do some of what I did, in that usually they transition from classroom teacher to teacher on special assignment, some kind of a coaching or curriculum and instruction position. And then oftentimes they move to be an assistant principal or a principal before returning to the district level. I skipped those steps, or just did not do those steps in that order. So now I am back as an assistant principal at the building level and absolutely love it. I'm not sure, for me personally, that I would ever go back to the district level.
And a question on that is just, I think so often there is this clear-cut progression on, if I spend a certain amount of years in this role, then I'm going to, progress into the next role. But, you've seemed, based on your experience, to, shatter that in and of itself, and you're kind of creating your own path in a way. Do you have any thoughts or advice to people that might feel stuck in their current role and want to do something else in education on different things that you did that they might learn from in order to, you know, take that next step at a role within their school or within at the district level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's a really great question, first of all. I think that I hear from people often who want to do something in addition to or instead of their current role within education. And it's not because they don't love what they're doing, but maybe they're just ready for the next challenge. And what I would encourage them to do is be very, very clear on what their current strengths are and where they want to develop their strengths, and then seek to put themselves in the notice of people who work within that field. So my strengths happen to be around developing teachers, implementing educational technology, and helping to build teams that can, you know, kind of that distributive leadership model. My strengths as an assistant principal are not at all around discipline. So I never did that traditional dean role where I would have been doing discipline all the time. I instead made sure that I developed I was blessed enough to work with people that would help me develop really strong coaching skills and stay current on technology and pedagogy and keep up on my professional reading and volunteer to participate in those organizations that also cared about the things that I was passionate about. And I think when you do that and you put yourself out there online and face to face and you contribute, then people do notice you and they do understand what your strengths are. I don't think every team needs every person on that team to be a 100% Renaissance person. I think it's okay to be clear on, hey, these are my current specialties, but then also to be willing to learn and grow. And so I would say for anybody who is looking for what are the next things, try to find those people who are already doing those next things, connect with them online, connect with them face to face once we get back to that being an okay thing to do, and involve yourself. And then I do think that you will get noticed, and then you'll be able to look for people who share your interests and passions.
Yeah, I like a lot. I like what you said, Liz, about just you know, background in team building and alignment. And I'm obviously not in education, but just in the software space. I think just in building teams, it's really, you know, I'm a big basketball fan, and it's like not every team can have a team full of LeBron Jameses, right? Every team
Right?
has different role players who do specific things, whether they're more generalists or specialists, or then you've got the superstars. It's really, you know, the magic happens when all of those skill sets and role types come together and align. Can you talk a little bit about just in your experience at the district levels, what processes were in place to help streamline, you know, that activity when it comes to, you know, alignment and measuring the success of it?
So tell me the question in a different way. Are you talking more about alignment and measuring success of an initiative that you might roll out, or are you speaking a little bit more to that? How do we develop teams and then judge the efficacy of the teams?
Yeah, so I'd like to maybe start at the team level and then
Mm,
then drill down.
yeah, absolutely. So, where I have seen really effective teams work at the district level, honestly has a lot to do with common projects. That's where I've seen it be really successful. So often the different departments within a larger system, for sure, they can easily become siloed and isolated. And it's not intentional, but sometimes they're physically located in different spaces, or they just have their own workload that they need to do. And that makes it very difficult for them to continue to make the time to build those cross-team relationships. Where I have seen that work really, really successfully is I've seen it work when you have an initiative that requires the team to pull it off successfully. Having a small work group with representatives from each of those teams work together and say, okay, I'll represent this part, and then you do this and this and this. And then you have your regular update meetings, almost like a scrum. And then you can stay up to date on what each other is doing, because then what happens is that individual representing, say, IT or curriculum instruction or professional development, that team can go back and update their larger department on what's going on. And so it's not that every department should meet with every other department all the time. I think a regular get together on that is a good thing for those department leaders. But if you have individual members within the department working on different cross-departmental teams to pull off larger initiatives, boy, that has a great benefit, not only in empathy development and appreciation for what the other departments are doing and the loads that they carry, but also just in terms of keeping that communication fresh and current.
I love that. And there's an element there that really highlights why we're doing this podcast. And it's really to break those internal silos and give inspiration about how educators are developing that cross-functional collaboration. And you just really described it well. And one of the things I just want to over index on, because you mentioned it in a way, but I think is super important for the audience to know, is just overall the importance of just communication in that process. Because you mentioned, maybe not everyone needs to be a part of every meeting, and it might just be the leaders of, that specific department, but having them go back to their teams and share information or action items that impact them. That's something that I think just being intentional about and just focusing on that clear communication and follow-up can really start doing really great things at a school or a district level to make sure that progress is happening. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. And may I add one more item with that?
Yeah, do it.
I found in the work with the nonprofit that I help support, the INEDCO, which is our Colorado ISTE affiliate. And that's how you and I, of course, got connected.
Yeah.
I have found that a really vital but seemingly underdeveloped skill is for people to understand how to bring back from outside work that they're doing to the whole group a quick summary on, here are the most salient points that you need to know. Here are the action items, and here's where I'd love your input or help. That quick kind of rundown is super essential, and it seems like it's really, really hard to do, because we get involved with projects that we're passionate about, and we want everybody to share that passion. And so we want to tell everybody all of the details. And in the end, you end up with the war and peace of meetings that just takes forever. And then you never get to your strategic work, because all you've done is updates on your tactical work, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So
loud and clear.
Yeah. So I think developing that skill, or maybe having a protocol to help guide people on, what were the big outcomes from your subgroup meeting? What are the things that are most important for the large group to ponder or share feedback on? And are there any action items that impact either your ability to contribute in the other larger group, or that need the whole group's action? I think that would be very, very helpful. And it just helps make things more efficient. And then it cuts down on a frustration that sometimes we feel at the building level, which is that sometimes we feel like the right hand and the left hand don't know what the other are doing. And it's really frustrating for us, because then we get hit from both sides instead of having a coordinated approach. So that quick style of update would be a huge recommendation that I would make for any district teams that are collaborating.
That makes a lot of sense. And what you described, I think, is probably just the hardest part, and focusing on that and being intentional with that. And where does that start? Like, from what have you seen to be successful? Where does that start, and that focus start, and then how does it trickle down? What have you, is there any instances you've seen as just like successful communication, successful collaboration between school and district level? Any examples?
Yeah, I do think that there are. So, some of the things that I have seen, I'm actually kind of seeing right now in the middle of this shift to online learning. So, I'm seeing sort of a daily huddle, similar to what you might do in software development, just that quick update with anybody who's connected with the team. So, in our case, what we're doing is we have the instructional end of the house at the building level and the technical end of the house, and both of us are connected to different teams at the district level. So we had a quick update meeting yesterday online. We all hopped on through a video call, and we said, okay, what are the issues that you're hearing of? What are the things that are cropping up that people might need help with, either from a technical aspect or they need a tutorial on, or we need to follow up with them to make sure they have instructional understanding. What can we forecast that we might need to be working on and prepared for so that we can respond agilely? And so that type of getting together meeting helped keep us able to be working in our own individual spaces and with our own areas of expertise, but being a liaison with our district teams and then bringing that back to a coordinated unit. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I'm just going to tell the audience, get your notebooks out and start taking some notes, because this is the stuff that's happening right now that real educators in real districts are dealing with and facing. And from my perspective, I'm learning, and I hope the rest of the audience listening are learning and can take what Liz just said, and hopefully, if it's not happening, can happen, because I think that description shows there is a focus on communication and alignment, and that's the starting point, and that's the building blocks that any educator is going to need to be focused on in order to kind of maximize the rest of the school year. So that's very, very helpful, and I'm glad you shared that context. I want to shift gears over to just you individually, and on just your biggest lessons that you learned in order from when transitioning from a district to school leadership.
In terms of looking back and what I would have changed if I had known, or what that transition, how that transition impacted me in terms of my work at the site level, kind of which direction were you thinking?
Looking back.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking back, I mean, honestly, I can see that there is a reason why sometimes people follow a more traditional path. And I do think that in some ways it would have made me more effective in my district role. So, looking back, some things that I definitely would have changed if I had already lived the assistant principal or the principal role is I would have had a lot more empathy for the pace that school leaders live at. Sometimes I would need to think about something for a while and think about, well, how does this impact the whole system before I give an individual an answer? And I would want to check with my broader cabinet team to make sure that it aligned with what they had going on. Uh, and sometimes that's the right thing to do, but other times people just needed a more immediate response. And I did not have a solid view of how in the moment school leaders' lives tend to be. And when you need an answer, it's because you have an issue that's on fire at the moment. You wouldn't be reaching out to the district just for giggles or just to bounce an idea off very often. You tend to be reaching out because you have a fire. And I wasn't always bringing a fire extinguisher or a way to help quite as quickly as I think people would have needed. So that's a lesson that I have learned. And it's a place where I really have immense appreciation for those people at the district level who, despite their tremendous workloads, somehow do manage to be really responsive, and they tend to have what I need on a just-in-time basis. I also would have, I didn't understand how collaborative the principal role is, and even the assistant principal role, but I especially see it with my boss. He is always on a text stream or on the phone with his colleagues, and they're always bouncing ideas off of each other. It's a very collaborative working environment, at least in our district. And so one of the things that I did not leverage appropriately was at the district level, if I could find out who those principal influencers were, I didn't have to train everybody or get everybody hooked on something that I knew was going to be valuable for them. What I needed to do was find those influencers, help them see whatever needed to happen. They would do it, and pretty soon everybody else would hop on board. So that was another piece that I use that principle in the same way at the school level right now. I find out who my teacher influences are. I ask if they would be willing to test or try something out. And then they are the apostles that go forth and share the message. And it just has a lot more credibility coming from those folks because they're in the trenches at the moment. And I think the last thing that I would do would be to see what I could provide that would be plug and play resources for people that they could take, that they could modify, edit, make specific to their site, their culture, their needs, and run with. I think when I was at the district level, and this was just me in my own hubris, I really wanted to be intimately involved. I wanted to go to buildings and I wanted to be a part of that work. But that wasn't actually my role at the time, or it wouldn't have been in that context. My role was to provide and equip the building leaders, and then they could take anything that I had worked on and they could distribute it more appropriately. When I was working in a larger system, but outside of the cabinet role, somehow I had a better grasp of that, and we did lots of train the trainer stuff. And then initiatives that we were trying to impact across the district went so much further because they were coming from the local voice. So I think those are the big three lessons that I would have. Quick response time is always appreciated from folks at the district level. Understanding and connecting with those district leaders so that then we can internally learn from them who are living in our role right now, and then having plug and play resources available that people can modify.
Those are super helpful. And for a second there, when you were describing the influencers or the champions, communicating with them first and how having them help kind of push the agenda forward, I thought for a second, man, Liz got a peek or a sneak behind the curtain of our marketing strategy and what we're doing at Dyknow, because it's very similar to what you just described. And it's amazing as I have these conversations, thinking about the similarities at times, which I wasn't expecting, between what we're doing in marketing a piece of software, what educators are doing. And really it comes down to how do you best collaborate, and the two C's, how do you best collaborate and how do you best communicate? And
absolutely.
yeah, it's just funny. And it's been, as I've had conversations like this, there's been so many insights that I look back on and can apply to kind of my day-to-day. One more question for you, just based on, I think it would be super helpful for our audience to know, and I know we touched on it here and there throughout this conversation, but just with your experience at school level, district level, with an understanding of what's happening now in the world and what schools and districts are trying to do to keep pace and adapt and finish out their semester strong, what sort of advice might you have for anyone that's currently going through these transitions to, e-learning or remote learning, like one nugget or advice that maybe you didn't touch on in the rest of your responses? Because I think if you're listening, a lot of what was described here can apply to that remote learning environment, but any parting thoughts you might have would be awesome.
Yeah, boy, I've sure been pondering that very intently in this last week, because unlike a lot of other districts who were on spring break this week, we're still in session. So we were e-learning all this week. We'll have spring break next week, and then we'll be back to e-learning for at least another 3 weeks after that. And so, yeah, that's really been on my mind about how do we help folks transition and transition well. And so I think some of the same things apply that we talked about earlier, and then maybe just a couple of new ones. I think in brief, figuring out who your support team is, and that may be people who have had that official designation, and maybe new leaders are going to crop up. I had kids on Instagram yesterday saying, hey, it would really help if we did this thing, and we'll send you a screencast and show you how to do it. Um, so you have your formal support team, and then you have your newly established support team that grows out of this time. I think keep that team tight, focused, and prioritize your work together so that no one person is getting burned out. And then I think the connected to that being talk to your people every day. Not everybody is going to respond, and that's fine. Don't expect that. But talk to your students, talk to your peers, talk to your leadership every day, and just share the reality of what's going on, because people can't support if they don't know what the needs are. So I would say be clear on that. And then the last thing that I would mention, sorry, I went a little over one there, but the last thing I would mention is determine what your new life balance is going to be. For example, I have found that I was glued to my workspace from 6 in the morning till 11 at night in the first few days, and I wasn't eating meals appropriately and so on, because I wanted to be so responsive to people, because I know that's what they need right now. But if I make myself sick and I'm out of commission for days or weeks, I'm going to be no use to anybody. So figure out when you can love on your kids, when you can walk your dogs, maybe prepare your lunch at the time that you make your breakfast and be able to steal that and just grab it as you go. So think of ways to take care of yourself, and then establish those, make those boundaries clear to your learners or the people that you're helping as well. These are the times I'm going to be immediately available, and then I'm going to hand off that baton to somebody else so that you can still get help right away, but I need a break sometimes too.
That is so important, and that's something I think just across all industries as people are trying to adapt to the new environment. The number one thing, instead of going head first and trying to figure it out and all the people around you and how you best work and operate, you got to really focus in on yourself, and that's your physical self, your mental self, and spending time through these changes and doing that will really help out your process moving forward. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. Just in closing, I'd love for you to share maybe groups you're a part of, places where people might be able to go to learn more about you, or anything you're working on. Is there anything you want to talk about before we sign off for today?
Oh, thanks. I think, me personally, it's not as important. But I would say the group that obviously I'm proud of my school community here in Academy School District 20 down in Colorado Springs, and Air Academy High School, which is my school. But aside from that, and kind of connected with that these days, is INEDCO. So INNEDCO.org. You can find us on all the socials at INEDCO or via LinkedIn. We are the Colorado ISTE affiliate, and we are looking right now, as are most people who run a face-to-face like summer conference for educators. We're looking at how's that going to run this year. Is that going to be online? Is it going to be face-to-face? Either way, we know we're going to have a great community coming together, and we'll have lots to share about by the time we get to summer, not only what we had originally scheduled with educators sharing back and forth, but here are the stories and the lessons learned from this spring's experience. So I encourage people, especially if you're in Colorado, Wyoming, any of the neighboring states who don't have an ISTE affiliate, please do connect with inedco.org. We have an online Facebook group where we're going to be hosting some conversations that just let people share what they're doing and maybe give one or two tips that they can take back to make their next week a little better. So stay connected with us, and we hope to be your partners on this learning journey and a real place of community support and love for you right now.
Inedco.org. Make sure you check it out, give it a follow, and pay attention. Liz, thank you so much for this real and authentic conversation based on the current state. We covered the whole gamut of your work experience, from the school to the district, and then also hit on some really important themes of communication and collaboration based on the current state. Hope the rest of the audience that listens to this enjoys it, and everybody take care of yourselves and be well. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Have a great afternoon.